Hello there, Alan here at Red Summit Machineworks. We're working on doing an install on our factory modified Rubicon sliders. It's great for adding a step to your Jeep, a little more protection, and with our bolt-on frame brackets you can turn them into a pretty heavy duty slider that fits the body line just like Jeep intended, rather than a straight bar that goes down the body line and leaves some unsightly gaps there at the end. So we're just going to go through a few little steps here to aid in your installation if you're doing it yourself, which is how we sell these kits. Or you can always send us your sliders and we can do it here in the shop for you. So step one is take the bars that we send out pre-bent and uncoped, kind of hold it up to the bar and get an idea for the angle that you find the most appealing. We send our brackets out for a 10-degree tilt up. That will allow your easiest fit up, but if you want them flat, that can be done too with a little bit of additional grinding. If you want them a little bit steeper, that's not a problem either. You'll just have to grind the tops of the brackets. 10 degrees seems to be an optimal angle to still act as a step while still giving you that protection and kind of a sleek boat side look rather than just a flat slider. So that's why we chose 10 degrees there. So once you kind of have an idea of what angle you like and that's in your mind, you can set that away for a minute. And then you can go on and remove the factory slider. We're going to do most of this install with the slider off of the Jeep. They're pretty easy to get off. It requires a 10mm end wrench, speed wrench helps, and a 13mm socket. So if you're working on a JT, you're going to have a couple additional bolts. The JL is a little bit shorter by 17 inches, so they're a little easier to work with, but the installation is essentially the same for both vehicles. So you can go on under there and uninstall those bolts. For purposes of this video, we'd already had most of them removed, but it's really not that long. It should take about 5 minutes. Most of the JLs and JTs are in pretty good shape, so you shouldn't fight any corrosion or rust yet just on these new vehicles. So once you go ahead and get all your bolts removed, it's kind of a one-man job. There are studs that go through the pinch seam, so you want to pull out and away and not ram this thing into your rocker panel and mess up your paint. That's all there is to removing it. So you've got 6 studs, 3 bolts. It weighs about 30 pounds. It's not that big of a deal, but it is pretty beefy and substantial, especially when you start adding to it. So that's going to be the end of step 1. So we're on to step 2. We've gone ahead and removed all the powder coat along the entire rail. It's probably not necessary, but it does make it easier to position these brackets as you don't have to worry about, are we on powder coat, are we not? It'll give you a nice clean weld surface. If you're planning on having the steps rhino lined, it's even less important to get rid of all the powder coat. If you're going to re-powder coat them, your powder coaters will thank you because it'll be a lot easier to blend to the existing powder coat. Most companies are willing to do this. We've done it with great success for years, especially on this black wrinkle. But you do want to kind of bevel it in like you would a body filler or something to kind of hide, because you're going to have 2 thicknesses of powder coat if you powder coat over the existing, and then you've got bare metal. So the more you can feather it in and smooth it out, the cleaner your end result is going to be. So we've gone ahead and done that, and we've started the layout. We're trying to use tools that you may have laying around your shop. We understand this is a DIY project, so we don't want to use tools that people aren't going to have. So we're going to do most of this with an angle grinder, just a welder, and blocks of wood and some jack stands. So we've got our brackets positioned where we think they look the best and they fit. You can slide them in and out. They also, if you follow the instructions and use our layout, it seems to be the optimal placement for getting in and out of the doors and accessing the bed on a JT and the front and rear door on a JL. So we've got those positioned. We are going to go ahead and set these up at 10 degrees. That's what the customer wanted. So we've got a nice weldable gap there, nice and weldable here. We will put a C-clamp along the top here to flatten these down before welding. Just the dimple die process does shrink the metal a little bit and causes a little bit of a bow there. That's perfectly normal but one C-clamp here will flatten that out during the welding process, and it'll be just fine. So we've got it kind of mocked up. Then we've gone along and we've marked our cuts to start our copes here on the round tube. So you can do that by taking a straight edge, holding it down the face of your slider there, and marking along. That's going to happen from time to time. Once you've got your lines, we would recommend taking a little off at a time. We're going to use an angle grinder here, maybe leave them a little long, and then we can kind of bevel them into shape. Because there is a contour on the slider here itself, you are going to have to kind of get a little creative with the grinder, otherwise you're going to be welding some big ugly gaps, and nobody wants to do that. So we're going to go ahead and complete this step, and we'll be back on step 3 once we've got things tacked into place and moving on to fitting up the kicker and adding it here on step 3. So we've gone ahead and fitted up our bar on the ground. We'll put the slider back on just using a couple bolts just to go ahead and check our fitment before we get ready to really start burning things in. You don't want to get it on and find out that you've got an interference with your fender, be it a stock fender or an aftermarket fender. And this also gives you an opportunity to get these in place where you might want them. One of the things we look for is not only outside curb appeal, but are they useful? So when you open the door, is it an actual step? Is it where it's functional for you? Everybody might prefer a little bit different placement, but you can slide these in and out, forward and back, to really get what you like. You might want them symmetric on the bars. You might want them more positioned for a functional step. It's totally up to you. It's great that they'll fit kind of anywhere in that range. You will have 3 of them for a JT. You'll have 2 for a JL, and then we've still got to go ahead and add this kicker back here. But we're going to address that here in the next segment when we get this off, now that we're happy with the placement of the bar, the angles look good, and we've got our position figured out here. So we're going to pull this back off, and we're going to start laying out the kicker tube. So the next step is to fit this kicker back here. We've gone ahead and taken the tube that we provided with the kit, and we've marked it using that vertical line, and then we held it up under here, and we marked the line across here. And take your time, spend your time doing this. The nicer your cuts, the smaller the gaps, the nicer the weld surface is going to be, and it's going to just make fitment and welding a lot easier. We've included this template here, so you can actually lay your slider. It's a 1-to-1 template, so you can lay the bar down. You can kind of see how the fitment is supposed to look, depending on how you cope it. You can see where this bar is. This is where we've placed our rear step, so that's also there in scale. You may have to trim this back plate along here just a little bit, depending on how tilted you are or aren't. If you flatten it out, you may have to grind the surface a little bit. We've left it long on purpose. That's just so that you don't end up with a gap back here, so you can trim it to length. In our case, with this fitment, we haven't had to do any trimming. You can also move this plate up and down in the surface, kind of depending on how you fit everything up. Just, you want to minimize any of the gaps, give yourself a nice big surface to weld on. These plates are interchangeable left to right, so you can have the dimple dies up, which we like to do. Gives you a little extra traction when you're getting in and out of the vehicle. But if you wanted the dimple dies down, you can flip this back plate. You cannot flip the front plates, unfortunately, but since those are supposed to serve as a step, we really like to have the dimple dies up on those. So we've got this whole side fitted up and tacked. The only thing we have left to do before final welding is go ahead and clamp these down and flatten them out when we do that final step, and it's ready to burn in. At that point, you can paint it, powder coat it, have it rhino lined. It's totally up to you. The next installment in this series will be installing the frame brackets that will really reinforce this. This is 100% functional as a step. I have no problem saying that you can stand on it, and you can use it as a rub rail in off-roading situations. If you're really going to be beating on it, I would definitely recommend adding the frame braces, because you are just relying on the pinch seam and the bottom of the body to mount this to. So you need something more substantial if you really try and use this as a hardcore slider, which is what we're going to address in the next series. So now that we've got everything fitted up on the floor, we bolted it back onto the Jeep just using 2 bolts. Just to verify that our final placement, we're happy with the kicker, we're happy with the angle we ended up at. If you open the door, you can really see the nice placement there. This isn't hitting anything, we're clear, got plenty of clearance here on our fender flare. So this one's ready to weld up. So the driver's side will be the same as the passenger side. We include a template for both sides so that you don't have to fiddle with flipping anything upside down. So once you're done with that, we bill out 2.5 hours per side for one guy. It's really not that big of a deal, and you can just paint it or have it repowder coated and you're all set.